My wife sued me for half my business. Then I hired a PI, exposed her secret affair, and watched her claims collapse. When I married Emily, I thought I had found someone who valued loyalty as much as I did. We had been together for nearly a decade, building what I believed was a strong and stable life. I owned a small but thriving construction business before we even met, and over the years, it had grown into something I was proud of. The house we lived in was mine long before she moved in, but I never made her feel like a guest. Everything I had, I shared with her. Then, without warning, she told me she wanted a divorce. There was no big fight leading up to it, no long, drawn-out tension, just a sudden coldness, followed by legal papers delivered to my office. At first, I thought maybe she was having some sort of breakdown or crisis, but then I saw what she was asking for. She wanted half of my business, half of my savings, and the house. She even demanded I pay her spousal support despite the fact that she had her own decent job. It felt like I'd been sucker punched. I couldn't wrap my head around how someone I trusted so completely could turn into a stranger almost overnight. My first instinct was to try to talk to her, to find out if there was some misunderstanding, but her lawyer made it clear she was serious. The stress hit me hard. I barely slept, my appetite disappeared, and I started losing weight without even realizing it. Friends told me to keep calm, to think with my head, not my heart, but it was impossible to switch off the anger and confusion swirling inside me. At work, I found myself zoning out during meetings, unable to focus. That's when I realized something important. If I kept reacting emotionally, I'd lose everything. I had to start thinking strategically, and if she wanted war, I was ready to give it to her. I began by hiring the best divorce attorney I could afford, someone with a reputation for being ruthless in court. I wasn't interested in half measures or quiet settlements. If Emily wanted to take everything from me, I was going to fight until she got nothing. My lawyer, Daniel, didn't sugarcoat the situation. He explained that because I'd owned the house and business before the marriage, I had a strong legal position, but Emily's demands could still cost me if I wasn't careful. I started gathering every document I could find: business records, property deeds, bank statements, even old emails. Daniel encouraged me to be meticulous. The more proof you have that these assets were yours before the marriage, the stronger our case, he said. It became almost therapeutic, combing through the past and building my defense piece by piece. But the more I dug, the angrier I became. I found receipts showing I had paid off her personal debts early in our marriage, vacations I'd funded entirely, even furniture for her parents' home that I'd bought without hesitation. All those years of generosity now felt like weapons she was turning against me. At night, I could barely sleep, so I channeled my energy into preparing. I changed all my passwords, closed joint accounts, and even had my business finances audited to ensure there was nothing she could twist into a claim. I stopped communicating with her directly. Everything went through the lawyers. It was during one of those long, sleepless nights that a thought crossed my mind. Maybe she hadn't left me for personal reasons at all. Maybe there was someone else. That suspicion began to eat at me. If I could prove she'd been unfaithful, it might strengthen my case even more. And suddenly, my fight for justice turned into a mission for the truth. The idea of her cheating lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. I didn't want to believe it, but certain things from the months before the divorce started to make sense. Late nights at work, sudden interest in dressing up more, her phone always locked and flipped face down. I decided I couldn't ignore it any longer. I contacted a private investigator recommended by a friend who'd been through a messy divorce himself. His name was Harris, a quiet, methodical man who didn't waste time on small talk. I gave him every detail I could remember about Emily's schedule, her friends, her habits. He listened carefully, took notes, and promised to keep me updated. While Harris worked, I threw myself into tightening my case. My lawyer filed motions to prevent Emily from accessing certain accounts until ownership was clarified. I knew she wouldn't like it, and that was the point. I wanted her to feel the pressure building. 2 weeks later, Harris called me in for a meeting. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs of Emily at a restaurant, holding hand with a man I'd never seen before. Other shots showed them leaving a hotel together late at night. My stomach tightened as I flipped through the images, each one a confirmation that my marriage had ended long before I even realized it. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected, but strangely, it also gave me clarity. Now, it wasn't just about protecting my assets. It was about making sure she faced consequences for her actions. I handed the folder to Daniel, who raised an eyebrow. "This changes things," he said. From that moment, I stopped thinking of it as a divorce. It became a battle, and I had just been handed my most powerful weapon, armed with proof of her affair. Daniel crafted a strategy that shifted the entire tone of the case. In our state, while infidelity didn't always affect asset division, it could influence spousal support and credibility in court. We decided to lean on that. The goal wasn't just to defend my assets. It was to dismantle her claims completely. We filed motions highlighting the evidence, framing her actions as a breach of the trust and commitment she was now exploiting for financial gain. Emily's lawyer tried to downplay it, claiming her personal life was irrelevant, but Daniel pushed back hard, arguing that it revealed her motives and the lack of good faith in her demands. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet publicly, letting her wonder how much I knew. Friends who still had contact with her told me she seemed nervous, asking if I had something planned. I kept my responses vague, fueling her uncertainty. That was intentional. If she was distracted, she might make mistakes. The stress was still heavy. Nights were long, and the constant meetings with lawyers drained me. I started running in the mornings just to clear my head, feeling that physical exhaustion was better than lying awake with anger eating at me. Strangely, each run made me more focused, more determined. In our next court session, Daniel presented the evidence subtly but effectively. The judge's expression hardened as the photographs were entered into the record. Emily avoided looking at me, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, I felt the power shifting. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was controlling the narrative. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The turning point came faster than I expected. Once the affair was on record, Emily's requests began to crumble under scrutiny. Her lawyer tried to argue she had contributed to my business's growth, but the financial records I'd gathered told a different story. Every expansion, every major profit had been funded entirely by me. Daniel methodically dismantled her claims, pointing out inconsistencies between her testimony and documented facts. When asked to provide proof of her supposed contributions, she had nothing but vague statements and selective memories. I could see the frustration building in her face. Outside the courtroom, I kept my distance, never engaging directly. I didn't want to give her any emotional leverage. Instead, I focused on my routine, early runs, meticulous preparation, and keeping my business running smoothly despite the chaos. The more stable I appeared, the more unstable she seemed. Then came the motion to deny her spousal support. Daniel argued that her infidelity, combined with her stable income, eliminated any justification for ongoing payments. The judge didn't rule immediately, but I could tell from his questions that our argument had landed. Privately, I started thinking about the endgame. I didn't just want to win. I wanted her to walk away realizing she had overplayed her hand, that greed had destroyed any chance of leaving with dignity. That thought kept me going through the sleepless nights. When the next hearing date was set, I felt a quiet confidence settling in. For the first time since this started, I could see a future where she left with nothing she hadn't earned. And if that day came, I knew I'd finally be able to breathe again. The final hearing felt like the culmination of months of sleepless nights, endless paperwork, and an emotional storm I never thought I'd survive. I sat at the plaintiff's table, calm on the outside, but my heart pounded as the judge began reading his decision. Every word felt like a slow drop of water in a silent room. He ruled that the house and business were entirely mine, citing the documentation proving they were acquired before the marriage. My savings were untouched, as she had no legal claim to them. And then came the part I'd been waiting for. Her request for spousal support was denied. The evidence of her affair, coupled with her steady income, had sealed that outcome. Emily's face was pale, her jaw tight. For a brief moment, Her eyes met mine, but there was no trace of the woman I once knew, only resentment and defeat. She left the courtroom quickly, avoiding anyone's gaze. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in months. It wasn't joy exactly, more like relief mixed with exhaustion. The war was over, and I had kept everything I had worked for. But there was also a strange hollowness. Winning hadn't erased the betrayal or the years I'd invested in someone who had turned on me so easily. That night, I sat alone in my house, the silence almost too loud. I realized that while I had won legally, I still had to figure out how to rebuild my life emotionally. But for now, I allowed myself one small victory, knowing that her attempt to take everything had left her with nothing. Update 1. It's been 3 months since the court ruling, and life has started to feel normal again, or at least a new version of normal. I've poured myself back into my business, taking on new projects and expanding into areas I'd been hesitant to try before. Without the constant legal battles, my energy has returned, and so has my focus. Friends tell me I seem lighter, and they're right. I've stopped waking up with that heavy knot in my stomach. I've even started sleeping through the night, something that felt impossible during the divorce. The morning runs are still part of my routine, but now they're about clearing my head instead of escaping my thoughts. I haven't heard from Emily since the ruling, though mutual acquaintances say she's moved into a small apartment and sold off some of the luxury items we once bought together. Part of me feels a grim satisfaction in knowing she's facing the reality of her choices. Another part doesn't think about her at all anymore, which is a victory in itself. Financially, I'm in the best shape I've ever been. The divorce forced me to look at every dollar and tighten systems I'd been too relaxed about before. Ironically, her attempt to take my assets made me more organized and more profitable. Still, I can't say there's no bitterness left. The betrayal was deep, and though I've moved forward, there are scars that will probably never fully fade. But now, they're a reminder, not of what I lost, but of what I survived. Update 2. 6 months have passed since the divorce, and I've found myself in a place I never expected, genuinely happy. My business has hit record profits, and I've been traveling more, something I avoided during my marriage because Emily never enjoyed being away from home. Now, I've seen 3 new countries, met incredible people, and remembered what it feels like to live without constant tension. Occasionally, the past creeps back in small ways. A song she used to play in the car, a restaurant we once visited, it stings for a moment, but the feeling fades quickly. Those memories have lost their power over me. What surprises me most is how my perspective on revenge has changed. At the start, I wanted her to feel crushed, to suffer in the same way she'd made me suffer. But now, I realize the real victory wasn't leaving her with nothing. It was rebuilding myself into someone stronger and more self-reliant than before. People sometimes ask if I'd ever consider speaking to her again. My answer is always the same. I have no interest in reopening old wounds. Whatever she's doing with her life now is none of my concern. The chapter is closed. If there's one lesson I've taken from all of this, it's that preparation and patience win battles. And in my case, they won the war.